have graphed some regular exponential functions, we're going to be adding and subtracting a number up here in the exponent, and we're going to be adding or subtracting a number outside of this equation here, so just add it onto it. So if you have a number that you add or subtract in the exponent, that's going to either move it to the right or to the left. It's always going to be the opposite of what you think. So if I have like x minus 3 up here, it seems like that would be 3 to the left, but it's really going to be 3 to the right. If I add or subtract a number right here, on level, so just to this whole equation, if I add, that will move my equation up, and if I subtract, that will move my equation down. So this number tells you what number you're approaching. So up to this point, we've always been approaching 0, right? And that's because if you look at these equations, you're adding nothing back here, right? Nothing. So we're always approaching 0. Well, now, since we've added a number to the back of this, we're going to be approaching 2. So we should decide if we're going to be approaching from the bottom or from the top, and that will just help us with our numbers. So if I look up front, I see that I have a positive number, so I know that I'm going to be above 2. And then I look at that number there, and I know that since that's bigger, and this is positive, that I'm going to be increasing. So if I'm approaching 2, that means that you're going to kind of view 2. I'm just going to put this dotted line here. Don't put it on yours. This is where you're going to be getting close to, right, is 2, not 0, because we've moved our graph up 2, right? So if I am increasing, that means that it's going to be kind of like this, right? So when you say approaching 2, these are actually above 2, right? So it might be like 2.00003, 2.002, 2.25, 2.53, but, all the way up. So we're going to use our table feature to do this, but it's going to give us some fractions, and we'll have to convert those to a decimal so that we can see where they're at on our graph. So I've gone to the table feature, and I have plugged in my equation, and I'm going to press enter. And I'm going to start at -2. That's fine, because I can always change that in my table. All right, so here's what I mean by you get these fractions, right? And you can go, okay, well, 8 goes into 17 2 times, right, with 1 left over, so that would be 2 1/8. But as you arrow up, these are getting farther and farther away from 2, right? So we want to find the one, and I always want you to be within 1/4 of 2, right? So that means if you're above the line, then 2 1/4. If you're below the line, 1.75, right? We're above the line, so I want 2 1/4. Now, we already decided that this was 2 1/8, right? Because 8 goes into 17 2 times with 1 left over, so 2 1/8. And 4 goes into 9 2 times, right, with 1 left over, so this would be 2 1/4. So that would put me at 1/4 above 2. So I'm going to start with this one. If you're unsure, then you can just press second and mode to quit, and then just start dividing those out. So that was 9 divided by 4, and that's 2.25, right? So since that's 2.25, that's 1/4 above, because remember, I want you to be somewhere between 1/2 and 1/4, either above or below your line. All right? That's why it's important to know what you're approaching. So we'll start with that 2.25, and to get back to that, you just go back to your table and press enter until you get back. So we will start with that point right there, the -1 9/4. So let's fill in our table. So now that we've gotten all of these points from our table, then we're just going to go ahead and graph, and we're going to keep in mind that we are approaching the 2, right? So we have -1, 2.25, 0, 1/2, or 2.5. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 6, and then 4, 10. So you'll start with that one where you're right there at the 2. Connect all of your dots. Put arrows on the ends. So on number 3, or number 10, we know that we're going to be approaching 3, so we need to decide if that's going to be from the top or from the bottom. So I look out front, and I just have a 1 out here, so I know that that's going to be above 3. So the numbers we would be looking for is somewhere between 3 and 3.5, right? I want you to have your lowest point to your 3 should be between 3 and 3.5. And then I also know that this is between 0 and 1, so this will be decreasing. So we're going to use our calculator again to go ahead and get the points for our graph. Now this is nice because it gave you decimals, right? So we decided that we were going to be on top of the line, so I wanted to be only a quarter above that line, right? So 3.25, this actually started us at a really good spot. So 3.25, and then if you look at this though, do you see how these are actually getting closer and closer to 3 if you go this direction? So this is actually going to be the last point that we use because if you think about it, we said we were above and decreasing, which means we would look like this, right? All right, so I need to go a little bit farther to the left with my x's. All right, so I can't fit the point negative 219 on my graph, so I'll start with the negative 1, 7, and then go from there. So this time we can only fit 3 points on here, and I'm 3.25 above my 3 since I'm approaching from the top. So I'm going to plot those points, negative 1, 7, 0, 4, and 1, 3.25. So remember, 3 is what I'm approaching, so I'm not going to go past 3. So when I draw this in, I'm going to start with that 1 that's close to the 3. And I'm going to put my arrows on both ends. So on number 11, we're going to be approaching negative 1. But I need to decide if that's going to be from the top or from the bottom. So I look up front and I have a negative number, which means I will be below the negative 1. All right. And since this looks like it's going to be increasing, it's really going to be decreasing. All right. And since I'm going from below and I'm decreasing, I'll have something that kind of looks like this, right? So your numbers will be a little bit bigger than negative 1, right? Like if I went past negative 1 here, these numbers would be like negative 1.003, negative 1.25. So I want to be within 0.25 there, right? So I should be looking for numbers that are like negative 1.25. So in between negative 1.5 and negative 1. That's what I'm looking for since I'm coming from below. If I was coming from the top, though, then I would actually be looking for like a little bit less than the negative 1, right? So make sure that in your mind you know what number you're trying to go for. So we're going to use our table feature, plug this in, and get those numbers for our table. So to avoid those fractions in your table, if you will put in the 3.0, it will give you decimals as opposed to fractions. So just change that base of your exponent if it's a whole number and put a 0.0 at the end. And that is a lot easier to look at your numbers. All right, so I'm getting closer and closer to negative 1. So if you look right here, this is negative 1.6, right? And this is negative 1.2. That's too far away from my negative 1, right? So I'm going to start with this negative 4, negative 1.2, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill in as far as I can go. So now I've filled in my table, and I'm going to go ahead and start plotting my points. So I have negative 4, negative 1.2. Negative 3, negative 1.7, negative 2, negative 3, and negative 1, negative 7. So see how I got really close to that negative 1? So I'm going to start right there and draw my graph in. So number 12, we're going to be approaching negative 3. So let's decide if we'll be on the top of the negative 3 or on the bottom. So I notice I have a positive number up front. So I'm going to be above the negative 3. And then I'm going to look right here, and since that was positive and this is bigger than 1, I know that I'm going to be increasing. So I like for you to give this a little mental thought. If you're going to be approaching from above your negative 3, right? Here's negative 3. That means that you're a little bit bigger than that, right? Which would be like negative 2.25. So you want to be between negative 2.5 and negative 3 because you're going to be a little bit above that. Sometimes when you have to go above on a negative, it seems a little bit weird. So that's why I like for you to think about it. What comes above the negative 3 is negative 2, so you should be in between there. All right, so we're going to go plug that in, and where we put the 2, so that we don't get a bunch of fractions, we're going to put a 2.0. So we need to decide where we're at. So we've already mentally decided that we need to be between negative 2.5, right, and 3. So maybe like negative 2.75. That would be within a quarter. So if you look at this, notice these are getting closer and closer and closer to 3, right? So I want to find maybe negative 2.75. So I can start right here. This would be fine. That's between negative 2.5 and 3. And if you have trouble thinking about decimals like that, think of them in terms of money, right? I want to be between $2.50 and $3. So 2.65 would be a good spot for that. So I'm going to use the negative 2 and the 2.65, 625, and then I'm going to keep going from there until I can't plot any more points. So I have my table of values. I'm just going to plot those points. So I have negative 2, negative 2.6, negative 1, negative 2.25, 0, negative 1.5, 1, 0, and then I have 2, 3, and 3, 9. So since we were approaching the negative 3 right here, that's where we'll start on that dot there. And then we'll draw all the way, put the arrows on both ends.